afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason. I work for the state office for the deaf and hard of hearing. I have been working with the office for deaf and hard of hearing for 6 years now. A little bit about myself. I was born deaf and my entire family is deaf. Now if you look at me and then you look at the PowerPoint, I would fit under the category of deaf, capital D deaf, because I have a cultural association and affiliation with my community of other deaf individuals. We have the shared values, norms, and traditions, just like any other ethnic group shares. And that's going to be different than that of any other disability, because we view us as full, independent individuals. The only thing different is our communication. The difference between a deaf person and a hard of hearing person is that a hard of hearing person is going to want to be mainstreamed in the general society and use spoken English to communicate, not sign language as a deaf person would. And they do not view their hearing loss as a cultural association, but rather a disability. Now, a person who is deafblind has a dual loss. They have some degree of hearing as well as vision loss. And their communication preference is going to vary depending on which sense they lost first, whether that be vision or hearing. So I hope that you can understand a little bit better about the cultural terminology, such as deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind. They're politically correct, culturally correct. The term hearing impaired is something we do not want to be using because that shows a negative stigmatism towards a person who has an inability to hear. We want to view them as a whole human being, not something that they're impaired of or not able to do. So use appropriate terminology. Most deaf and hard of hearing people have a very hard time lip reading someone to get the message. What they do is they overcome their barrier by using coping mechanisms, because only 25% of the English language is visible on lips. But if you just approach a deaf or hard of hearing person in an emergency situation, under their stress and everything that's going on, it's going to be very difficult for them to try and lip read you to understand what's going on. So just be aware of that. Now, hearing aids and cochlear implants do not function like glasses. People that have a vision loss use glasses to help clarify what they're seeing and to see better, to see more clearly. But a person with a hearing loss that uses a hearing aid, that hearing aid, all it does is amplify the sound, it does not clarify the sound. So if they're hearing something like static on a TV, all the hearing aid is going to do is make that static sound louder, not any clearer. Now if one person has quote unquote a good ear and their other ear, if they have a good ear is their right ear and then their left ear is something that has a hearing loss, don't speak into their good ear. You can't, it's not like your right ear only interacts with the right portion of your brain and the left ear focuses with their left part. If that person has a hard time hearing, just ask them questions about their communication style and preference and make sure that you're patient with them. And then if you take time and ask them, things will work out in the end. One thing I can't stress enough, just don't assume that you need to talk louder and that will solve everything. Because a lot of times when people start amplifying their voice, they have over-exaggeration on their mouth and it looks like they're kind of mad at us. So we assume that something's not going according to plan and you're upset with us, so we're intimidated. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes, depending on a person's hearing loss, it could be that they just have a low frequency hearing loss and they hear a higher pitched voice better, or maybe they have a high pitched loss and they hear a low frequency voice better. So if you have that kind of a person, ask them if they would prefer to speak with a man or a woman, because it might be easier for them to hear. Now, if you see a person that uses sign language to communicate, don't assume that they're a lower level of intelligence, because oftentimes if you're writing in English to communicate that kind of form, their English might seem broken, not natural, not proper grammar. And that's because English is their second language. It's not their first language. Sign language is not a written language, only visible language. If you are struggling to communicate, I highly suggest that you use gestures. Any body language, facial expressions that you can use are key when you're communicating with a deaf or hard of hearing person, because we are very visually oriented. Okay, I briefly mentioned this before, that a deaf person does use American Sign Language to communicate. A hard of hearing person will probably rely on spoken English, and a deaf-blind person, that varies depending on which blocks that they have experienced first. Now, Relay is a great piece of technology that we use, and more recently they've developed video relay service. So what happens is I have a video phone. So you can see the picture on the left-hand side. That would be me. And then I'm signing into the TV, which is attached to a camera, and I can use American Sign Language to communicate. And I'm connected to a sign language interpreter who can see me on her own TV screen. And then she's talking to you, a person that's using the telephone, just kind of like we are now, only in two different areas. When you're talking with the person who has a hearing loss, it's essential that you take into consideration the environment around you. Maybe there's a lot of visual distraction because people are running around in an emergency situation, or there's a lot of background noise. That will interfere with your ability to communicate effectively with that individual. Also, eye contact is very important. Another suggestion that I have for you is to avoid a yes/no question. Just use an open-ended question, because just imagine, put yourself in this person's shoes. They're overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're in an emergency situation, and if you ask, do you understand me? They're already freaked out. They're going to comply with you. You're in a position of authority. They want to just get out of it as soon as possible. And as I said in the beginning, please be patient when you're talking with these people. Or if you just feel like you're not getting through to the person, you're not understanding each other, don't be afraid to model it. If you have to lead them to a room, then that gets the job done. Do it. Now, if you do need to use a sign language interpreter, I would avoid using children if the parents are deaf as their interpreter. Because think about it from a child's perspective. They have to translate between two different languages that they're probably not completely competent in. They're learning their languages as they're growing. Now, when you start talking with someone, again, make eye contact. If you're just, talking to me and I'm not looking at you, I have no idea you're trying to communicate with me, and you could get irritated and I could be embarrassed. Okay, thank you.